Welcome to Bizruptions, a video podcast where we talk about the ish that happens along the road to business success and how to keep pushing through it. And now, from the Yokel Local studios in lovely Las Vegas, we are Think Out of the Box hosts, Stormie Andrews and Borah Fortune Stott.
Look at this. We've got a great show in store for you today. Borah, tell us about our guest.
Well, the first thing I want to tell them is we said from the Yokel Local studios in lovely Las Vegas. We are half in lovely Las Vegas, and we are taking technology to the next level because our guest is not here with us, but he is certainly present. So I want to tell you about our amazing guest today. It took us a while to get him on, but usually if it takes a while, that only means that we've got something powerful in store.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm going to introduce our amazing guest, Damian Mason. Damien is an entrepreneur, speaker, farm owner, author, podcaster, and self-made business person. He's actually lived and accomplished what he talks about and teaches. Imagine that.
Yeah,
that's
imagine
a novel.
that.
That's a novel thought there. Damien delivers insights and information to inspire individuals and organizations to do business better.
Right.
Audiences positively respond to his real-world examples, straight talk, and smart comedic edge. Comedy is always good on the Bizruptions podcast.
Absolutely. This is going to be great.
Yes. He has spoken to nearly 2,000 business audiences in 50 states and 7 foreign countries. He's a certified speaker professional and a Screen Actors Guild member. Imagine that. Who has, and this is kind of exciting, I think.
Okay,
I'm a
let's hear
movie
it.
buff. He has acted in 2 major pictures alongside stars like Jodie Foster,
What?
Matthew McConaughey,
The man.
and Leslie Nielsen. Damien lives with his wife, Lori, and their dog, Jack, between the Indiana farm and the winter home in Arizona. Imagine that. Welcome to the show, Damien.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Stormie. Thanks, Borah. Thanks for having me here. Glad to be part of Bizruptions. I'll do my part to make this worthwhile for your listeners. I promise I've got some interesting stuff for them, and I think that it's going to be a lot of fun with you two if I can just keep you two apart.
He's going to referee us from. Are you in Arizona or Indiana right now?
I'm sitting in my office in Arizona right now, down the road from you in Las Vegas. It's also going to be 101 or 102 degrees here today as we record, but it's okay. I'm sitting in an air-conditioned office with my studio, so I'm good, and I know you're comfortable as well. We'll go back to Indiana in May. We're usually Indiana from May until sometime in November, and then Arizona sometime in November until early May.
Wow, so you're 101 in Arizona, and it's not even May yet, is what you're really saying.
Wow. Yeah.
You know what? I came here for the heat and the sunshine, so it's okay.
That's what it's all about. And I heard some parallels there. You spend time between Indiana and Arizona, kind of like you, Borah. You spend time between Summerlin and the penitentiary, is my understanding, but that's a different story. It's not about you today.
I'm on the work release program.
Okay, so that works out okay.
Well, welcome to the show, Damien. We are really excited about you teaching us how to do business better.
And I just got to throw in a quick plug for Damien. So let me just share with the audience how Damien and I met.
Okay.
So Damien came to speak at the NSA, the National Speakers Association chapter here in Las Vegas. And that's a group that I belong to, and we have a lot of great speakers that come on board. And I got a chance to meet Damien the day before he was going to speak. We had a dinner together with the board, and it was an event that I wasn't going to attend. You remember that, Damien?
I remember that. You said you had to take your car for an oil change, and I thought this is like the old thing about I have to wash my hair.
I've got to wash my hair. I can't take the day tonight.
Right. I was preparing for a big trip the following day, so I had to get some maintenance done for my car, and just a few minutes that we spent over the dinner, I'm like, you know what? There's something special about this guy, and I've got to rearrange my plans to hear him speak. And I was so glad that I did because he was incredible. He took control of the room and he shared some knowledge that was phenomenal. And I got a chance to get a copy of his book, Brutal Truth, which is a lot of fun. You guys definitely check this out on Amazon. It's great. And just an incredible guy. So I'm really, really glad that we got you on the show. And one thing you may not be aware of, Damien, is this is the first show that we've done using Zoom for the video listeners that we've done with someone who's been out of state.
That's right.
So you are the inaugural person to take advantage of this. So that is awesome.
Well, I see it's recording, and I know that as a podcaster myself, and most of mine are done via Zoom, I know the most important thing is you want to make sure you actually are recording, because it's really, really painful for everybody involved if you do this and then you have to go back and say it all again.
And in Stormie's case, that he's not the only person on camera, because he's notorious for doing that.
Absolutely.
Damien.
So we are recording. I'm glad to be here. I can do this again sometime if we have so much fun this time. Yeah, I can do it even from Indiana. You can see that it won't be a whole hell of a lot different, because that's what Zoom technology does for us. So yeah, I got to tell you, Stormie, I didn't know Borah. I only know her now through some emails, and then of course today. But Stormie and I, to further on that, I mentioned that Friday night before, and then I was going to deliver a presentation at the conference in Las Vegas. And when I heard this thing about I've got to go get an oil change, I said, for God's sake, I came here, I sacrificed my time, I'm not being paid to do this. You know what? Come to this deal tomorrow. I promise you I'll make it worth your while. And we did about 4.5 hours. I don't know, you were there for most of that time. We talked about business reinvention and things that you can use.
Absolutely.
So you didn't even give a better excuse than an oil change story. Oh my.
It was more to it. That was one of the items that I just had to get done. Wow. I got it done, but you know what? There's the power of Uber. So when they did the work on the car, that stuff was happening while I was at the NSA. So I multitasked.
Gotcha. And he did come back and he was ranting and raving about you, Damien.
Well, we tried to make it worthwhile, because remember, everybody there was also spending their time. And I think the worst thing you can do, just like on this podcast right here, Bizruptions, let's make sure that we don't waste our audience's time. Let's make sure we give them something that they can use, something of value, something to think about, an insight, an idea, information, inspiration, whatever.
So with that being said, one of the things that you talked about was reinvention. Would you mind just diving into reinvention, because that was extremely inspirational, and I would love for you to share your thoughts on reinvention with our audience, if you don't mind.
Yes,
absolutely, yeah. It's a topic that I speak about, and I started doing presentations about this, even with breakout sessions or corporate groups, about 5 years ago. And the reason it came about is because I've had to do it myself. Everybody that's... Are we okay?
No, we're good. We're good on this side.
Okay. I got to say that everybody that's in business, everybody that works for a business, everybody that works for themselves, runs a business, or what have you, is going to go through a realization, and you hope it's not too late. And that's the issue with reinvention, because the world changes, the marketplace evolves, and that's what's supposed to happen. I mean, we know that the pace of change is faster than it used to be, and all that kind of thing. We went from horsepower to mechanized power and all that, but it's not just about technology, it's about the entire marketplace. I just read that the number of self-employed, entrepreneurial, freelancer, e-lancer, solopreneurs are probably going to triple in the next couple of years because of the gig economy. So when I talk about reinvention, I talk about how you can stay relevant in tomorrow's market. And it means in demand. As I said to your audience there, Stormie, what relevance means is your phone rings, your telephone is got somebody calling you that they want to do business with you. Your email box is full of people that need your services. Demand is relevance. And when you lose demand, it's because you no longer matter. And when you no longer matter, it's just a matter of time to extinct. And that's the reality of reinvention. And of course, it's time to reinvent. Everybody says, well, yeah, we're going to probably have to be doing that in the next couple of years. No. By the time you think you are really getting screwed and you're already irrelevant, is too late. You're pushed into the corner. That's it. The time to reinvent and transform really now. You're not back in the corner.
Right.
That's very true. Yes. And for most people, they don't even start to get a clue until they're backed into that corner.
Yeah, what happens, Borah, is obviously everybody, they love to say creature of habit. That's a big important thing. Everybody says, oh, creature of habit. And I would always say, no, it's really creature of routine. A habit is an active, acquired behavior, whereas routine is mindless, unimaginative, a procedure that you don't even think about. So humans do usually take the path of least resistance. And if you say, all right, I'm not going to have to make any changes, I'm just going to keep doing this, you know, the average person isn't an innovator. They're not a big risk taker. Not being mean. I'm not being mean. It's just the reality. That's what most people are. So the idea that you're going to have to completely change up what you do, how you do it, and reinvent yourself, your product, your brand, your image, how you do things, pretty threatening, pretty uncomfortable, and it gets people out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, that path of least resistance is very crowded.
Well, I can't say that I've always taken the path of least resistance. Sometimes through the right moves and sometimes through stupid moves. I've taken a really, really difficult and resistful path. And sometimes it's worked out and sometimes it beat the hell out of me.
Yeah,
exactly, yes. Definitely. So, go ahead.
No, dive in.
So we want to know a little more about this journey that you've taken. I know I saw some things in doing my due diligence and my research, and you've been we'll say a pseudo business person since like the age of 8. Is that true?
8.
Is that true? Yeah. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, you know, I've been a guy that wanted to make money and wanted to, I guess, enterprising since I was a little kid. I was raised in a big family on a dairy farm in northern Indiana, and we were not the well-off variety where we had hired peasants go out and do the work. I was the hired peasant, except that we actually, there was no hiring. It was just go do it. You know, I didn't make any money, but my first job was feeding the calves on the dairy operation. I was an 8-year-old. And from an early age, I was always a worker because that's what you are. And I can't say that all 8 of my siblings are. There's several of them that really aren't. But I was a really hard worker, and I always kind of had this idea, the responsibility to put it on me as the youngest, and my parents were kind of like grandparent age. So I started keeping an eye on business stuff. I started keeping an eye on money. And I remember someone handed me their old checkbook. I wanted to learn how to make my checkbooks when I was 8. You know, my favorite toys were cars. And then I got Play Money at Easter one time, and I wanted to know how that worked. And it's not that I'm greedy, it's just that I thought it was always something I gravitated toward business. My mom back in the country went and cleaned out my old closet, and I found a ledger in there from when I was a teenager, and I had put in there every dollar I made, the date, and I had a ledger going. I'd forgotten I had done that, and it's like, you can say, oh, you're obsessed. I'm like, no, I want to see if I was making forward progress, because did 1988 beat 1987, beat 1986? Was I making forward progress? I started a window cleaning business when I was about 19 or 20 years old. That was a neat thing. It didn't take off, you know, in any grand fashion. So I learned and then I got done with it. I took all of my equipment that I had, all my rooms and screws and all that stuff. And I sold them to my last client. I'm getting out of this. The neighborhood. And he said, well, what are you doing on my business? You are. I'll sell you all my stuff. I'll sell you all my stuff for about 2/3 of what I paid for it. So I made money, and you know, for the whole time I went to the business, and I sold my equipment to him. So I guess I've always looked at things as, how can you make a buck? And I can't say that there's people on Wall Street that are driven to where they'll even screw over and mess up our entire world economy over that.
Right.
I've been like that. My thing was always, what can I do? And also, increasingly, how can I do it on my own terms? You know, I was a corporate guy. I've had a lot of jobs like everybody. I was a factory worker when I was in college. I worked the overnight shift in a ceiling tile factory to pay my own way through school. I've been a landscaper. I've been a bartender. But when I got out of college and became a corporate guy, I thought, okay, this will be it. This will be my thing. And I remember you're on a company expense account. You guys have probably both been there, and they give you the car allowance, and you get your little bonus, and you're like, hey, man, this is good. I'm eating a lobster at Las Vegas when we went to the convention center, and I'm thinking, I can live.
They're paying for it.
Right.
You know, you're 23 years old, and you're like, I've been working since I was 8, and it was a lot harder digging ditches and baling hay and feeding calves. And now I'm going to the interview, so people my job was in the 80s. I'm drinking a 22-ounce lobster tail. I'm like, this corporate life might be for me. And probably like a lot of people listening to your podcast who are entrepreneurial or self-employed, after a year and a half or two, I saw, I don't think I want to do this. I think I want to do my own thing.
Right.
My big initiative, my big thing was then, what do I really want? And it came down to two things. I'm sure that everybody listening to Bizruptions is like, wow, that's it for me also. For me, it was one to be creative. Because believe it or not, selling light fixtures is not that damn easy.
But they're light bulb moments.
They're light bulbs.
But I'm bump.
But we were just the fixtures, yes. And the second part of it is I want to be more in charge of my own compensation, because while I was not doing poorly, I always realized that you could get a bigger raise if you were enough of an ass kiss, or if you laughed at all the president of the company's jokes, even though they sucked, you got more favoritism. And I didn't want my career and my compensation to be based on my ability to kiss butt. And that's when I decided, you know what, I'm going to strike right on my own and create my own, and I can be more creative and I can be more in charge of my compensation. So I'm sure that you guys have your own story too. Is that the same way for you?
Well, similar. I know Deborah's is similar. All the jobs you mentioned, she's only had one job her entire life, and her title was couch potato. And
and I have mastered it.
She's mastered it. I'll tell you what, her and Jerry Springer are best friends.
We certainly are. So
No,
that, go ahead.
But that's a good question. It's amazing the parallels that you mentioned, because I think about it, the same way. I started a career in sales, went through corporate America, and I thought this was the end all be all. But eventually started my own business. But, one of the things that you said that really, really struck a chord with me, when you were a youngster, actually a couple of things you said struck a chord with me. When you were a youngster, you kept a ledger, knowing if you made more money the next year than the previous year. But the other thing you said, which is just so, so important, and it's unfortunate because I don't think the culture that you mentioned was taught in the 80s. You mentioned that you made your money by providing value, not screwing over another person. And I think about all the shows that were made in the 80s, which unfortunately I believe influenced a lot of the guys on Wall Street. It was about screw over whoever you can, whenever you can, to make a buck. It's all about the mighty dollar. And it's a shame. And it was just refreshing to hear you say that, the fact that, who was it? Earl Nightingale or Zig Ziglar? I don't recall which one, but they said, you know what, you make your money by providing value, to others. And Earl Nightingale, lead the field. It came to my mind, and Zig Ziglar may have repeated it. And it's just refreshing when I hear people today repeat that, because it's unfortunate when others don't believe in that mentality.
Stormie, it's Earl Nightingale, and I kind of modified one of his quotes in my book, Do Business Better, because his statement was, every dollar you're going to make is right now someone else's dollars. It's something like that. And the point of the matter is, I say all the time that there's no such thing as self-employed. Somebody listening to Bizruptions right now might think they're self-employed, but you're not self-employed. If you're self-employed, why would you be working so hard? You give yourself a pay raise. We work for other people, no matter what we do. Even if we work for a company that is in the window installation business, or a company that is lawn care business, you don't work for XYZ Lawn Care. You work for the customers that have the lawn, ultimately. And so that's an important distinction. Your thing about the 80s, I'm 49 years old. I graduated from high school in 1988. I would say that dead on, there was that thing like the Wall Street, the movie about Wall Street and all that. And the idea was big, garish, screw the world. And maybe it's because I'm a blue collar kid. My dad worked nights on the railroad, and my mom and a few of us kids did the farm work. I always worked for other people. So while I was focused on business and making more money because I didn't come from much, I never thought you do this by going out and screwing the marketplace. You do this by providing value, like you said. And that's about ethics and morals and values and all those things. But really, I've always thought that, I've been a service provider for 25 years as a comedian or as a speaker, author, whatever you want to do now. Now they have other things at this point, other little business ventures that have helped out. But in general, you're a service provider, and you must always believe that as a service provider, I work for other people.
Now, where did you, okay, so somewhere along the way, when I was going through your bio in the beginning, we talked about that you were still a, you're this self-made businessman, and you live what you teach and what you speak. You've lived it versus a lot of people that are teaching and training and they've never, you want to train multimillionaires, but you've never made $1 million.
Right.
And then at the same time, you have this farm side where you talk about you worked really hard, but yet you're still a farmer. Great cow.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think we should also not be so arrogant. And everybody listening to Bizruptions right now probably knows who we're talking about because they're everywhere. They're on infomercials and they're on YouTube selling you on a program. And, you know, Tony Robbins, he talks about being successful. What he's mostly been successful at is telling people how to be successful. You know, and that's the reality of the situation. I didn't come from much. You know, I paid my own way through college and always worked. Like I said, starting my own window cleaning business to factory work to landscaping to whatever. But I decided that I was going to try and get smarter about business. And I don't have an advanced degree. I just have a BS degree in agricultural economics. I don't have an MBA. But many of the people that have MBAs came from a pretty affluent background and then were well educated, but have they ever actually been working the third shift on that factory floor? Have they ever been there when the foreman and the supervisor and the plant engineer are hashing out over how to get more ceiling tile out the door because the line broke down and the raw materials aren't there? And that's where I think the work experience, and there are people that just go to work to make their money, and there's people who go to work to make their money, but also pay attention. And that was always me. I became a political comedian in 1994. And I always say to be a comedian, Borah, is to really be a professional observer. If you're able to make a business and a career out of comedy, it's because you are a really good observer. You can't just do stupid bit jokes. You do smarter material, you know? Yeah. And I've always been a really big observer. Pay attention to everything, read a variety of sources, watch different TV channels, watch your fellow man or woman at the airport, watch behaviors, and that's an important thing. So when I say I've actually done what I talk about, I wrote a book called Do Business Better. It's not called How to Make $1 Billion by Laying Around, because I don't know how to do that. It's not called it's not how to be the most intelligent investment banker on Wall Street. I've never been an investment banker. Right. I have been a self-employed and a kid that worked his whole life and took a BS degree and a sales background and a farm boy background and multiplied it. My first business was political comedy. And I did travel all the time. And every day that I traveled, I made it my job to get smarter. I started reading investment books and financial books and business books. I decided, you know what? I've got this 3 hours on the airplane. I can do like other people and just jack around and watch movies, which you do that sometimes. But also you can get smarter. And that's what I made my objective, was to get smarter, because staying self-employed then became my goal. Staying independent became my goal. Hence, as you said, the farm. I didn't inherit the farm. I bought farms.
Oh, wow.
And so that way I have an asset base. And it's not a huge return, but it's also a very steady and safe return. So I own these farm properties. I live there part of the year. I rent out the farmland. It is an investment. It is a cash flow generator, because one thing, if you own a strip center, you might have 40% vacancy. You know, if you own a shopping mall, for God's sakes, you might have 60% vacancy. Look what's happening.
Right. Yes. Yes.
You know what's happening, obviously. Farmland, while it doesn't have as big of an upside, because it's not going to maybe generate 25% returns, farmland almost never sits vacant. In fact, it never does in Indiana. Someone is going to renew it every year. So there's a zero vacancy rate, and it's a ka-chunk kind of play. So it appreciates its value. You can do the appreciation depreciation game with your taxes, get your cash in it, and it's a long-term game. Then I've also owned some investment property, fixer-uppers, and I always looked at, those are the things you do. You have a couple of months delivering speeches or consulting. Let's take some of that money and go buy this. And then my wife fixes it up, and then we put in a renter. We've done some of these things over time because I think that when you do one thing, you also should have, everybody loves to say diversity. I'm going to give you another one. I've got what I call the ACRs of building wealth. Everybody talks about
ACRs.
Right?
Okay.
You've heard the ABCs of closing, right?
Yes,
Yep,
ABC,
absolutely.
Yeah. The ACRs now, what is that?
The ACRs of wealth building always charge rent. If someone is paying rent, if you're always charging rent, that means every month someone is giving you money. That's a pretty good situation to be in. If people say, I don't know if I want to be a tenant, I want to be an owner and deal with tenants. Yeah, there's that problem. You know, they always say tenants and toilets and all those things are headaches. But I looked at it as I've got people paying me rent, and it's the asset appreciates the value. So you get the cash flow, you get the rental, you get the income, and you get the long-term appreciation on the assets. So that's kind of how I looked at it on farm stuff. Because I was raised on a farm. I know farm. I do piddle with it myself, but mostly I manage my timber and I manage my beef. But the rent is for the main cropland. So that's one of the things that we do, and one of the things I have managing going on in addition to my speaking and writing.
Well, as
that
as
was awesome. That was an education.
Yes, it was. As a former investor myself who took a bloodbath in one of the hardest hit markets here in Vegas, 0% vacancy would be really, really nice. I'd still be busy.
Yeah, you know, it's not sexy. And I will admit, you know, there's all these different, as you know, Deborah, every day someone will come to you and say, well, why do you have this much of your wealth tied up in farmland? Shouldn't you take it and put it into, right now, let's go to the Bay Area and take your money and put 25% down, and then you're going to leverage the hell out of your 25% down. And then through that, you're going to buy these condos that are being developed for the tech kids. Like, that's neat. And then when the tech bust happens, and I'm sitting there with a leveraged 25% down, I'm not against doing that. I understand those investments. Right now, I figure my other business is at risk. Let's have this part of our investment portfolio at a less risky situation.
Wow,
that
absolutely.
Makes perfect sense. That
makes tons of sense. And it was so eloquently stated. I mean, that it just makes me feel like, wow, I've been
I'm moving to Indiana.
Yeah, I'm moving to Indiana.
No, right now is not the time to be buying either. It's right now we could argue that farmland in places like where I am from is actually a little overvalued, but I'm not in it for as much as today's value. So we're okay. Plus, like I said, there's always the cash flow per chunk. We have other investments. We have other things that we do, but you know, the bulk of my time is spent delivering speeches at corporate events, associations or agricultural functions, and then of course you know, putting together the book, which you guys have, you know, so graciously allowed me to plug a couple times for your listeners to Bizruptions. The book is called Do Business Better,
and we're about to talk about that book in just a minute.
Yeah, I want to dive right into it. I'm excited about hearing. Tell us what this book is about.
That's right. I love that background there. I love that.
Absolutely.
I think behind me I'm going to get a big picture of myself.
And did you hear that? She says, I think. She does not do that often. So that is a huge compliment.
I'm going to get a big old
I appreciate that.
Of me back there. So tell us, we have mentioned this Do Business Better. Tell us a little bit about this book, because I'm excited to hear more about it. Just the name itself is one of those that stops you and says, I need to know more.
And that's the name of your podcast too. He has a Damien.
Ooh, there we go. The
there
book.
it is. There's the book. So tell us about the book. Tell us about the podcast. Tell us about.
So 2 years ago, because agriculture is an important part of my business. Like I said, I go and speak at agricultural meetings, and I know there's some folks listening like, oh, you go and talk to farmers. Remember, agriculture is a tremendous amount more than farmers. Yesterday, for instance, my client was the California Grain and Feed Association. These are the kind of people that move trains of grain and process dog food or cattle feed or whatever. These are not farmers. These are people in the grain and feed business. So agriculture is a lot more encompassing than farmers. You know, you've got the machinery, the finance, the insurance. You know, there's so many more different ancillary inputs. So I do a lot in agriculture. So 2 years ago, I invented the Business of Agriculture podcast. And then 2 or 3 months ago, I said, we need the next podcast. It's going to be called the Do Business Better podcast. And it is geared toward entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, business owners, business people, and folks that want to learn from business-minded entrepreneur, solopreneur, business owner. So it's a good podcast, in my opinion, because I try to make sure there's always a lesson that anybody that runs their own operation can take from it, or 3 lessons, or 10 lessons. The book came together because a couple of years ago, I started putting together my notes, my files. Probably had so many of us. We all have a book within us, right? I'm sure saying, I've got a book in me. I've got 3 books in me.
I wrote one. Stormie's saying he has one in him, but he's a slacker.
So Stormie, I'm going to tell you something that they taught me. I went to Second City, Chicago. That's the place where you do comedy and improv stuff. So when I was transitioning from being a political comedian to the rest of my life, this has been about 15, 16, 18 years ago, I took a writing and improv class.
Okay.
And the first day in the writing class, they said, we're going to kind of clarify something right off the bat. The person who writes when the mood strikes them is a doodler. A person who writes every day is a writer. Huh. And then I remember thinking, that's probably pretty accurate. And then they said, do you think Michael Jordan practiced basketball when the mood struck him? Or do you think he practiced basketball like it was his profession?
Wow.
And that's how we must look at writing. Now, I don't write every day. I compile ideas every day. It's hard to write. You're doing your mic check, getting on stage, checking out your slides, preparing what you're going to say. But I do create and compile ideas every day. So I had files of stuff, and I had partial chapters begun. And then it kind of dawned on me, like, what would I say? And a friend of mine, Larry Winget, who you guys know,
yep,
very helpful to me. He's a speaker, and he's a 6-time New York Times, Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and he's been on a lot of TV shows. He's a brilliant guy. And he said, Damien, here's the rule. What's your book about? What's it not about? Who's it for? Who's it not for? And who are you to deliver information?
Wow. What's your book? Let's see if I got this straight. What is your book about? What is it not about? Who is it for? Who is it not for? And who are you to give that information?
Wow.
That's
that could
great.
be like a gut punch, like, ugh.
Well, because you know what? And I went and I thought, man, that's right. And so before I started putting all those notes and files and sample chapters together and then compiling it, I went and I answered those 5 questions. Who is Do Business Better for? The person that is a business-minded individual. They don't have to be a business owner or entrepreneur or solopreneur or self-employed, but that's more who it's geared to. They have to want to do their own personal business, their professional business better. Who's it not for? It's not for slackers. It's not for people dwellers. They're just trying to get till their retirement. And there are people like that. It's
right.
probably not for government employees. They're just saying, hey, you know what? Things are really simple here. I just come in and I can retire with the rule of 85. I'm not being those people, but there's not a message that they're going to probably latch onto unless they're ready to get that job. Start their business. What's it about? It's about fundamentals. You know, I wrestled in high school, and I'm not, good enough to be an Olympic wrestler, and I can just tell you this. Fundamentals, blocking and tackling, your simple, think of any sport you play. Dribbling and passing the ball and knowing how to shoot layups and free throws will win a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
Fundamentals. This book isn't one of those nonsensical, charlatan books about, hey, let's be honest, the 4-hour work week, who in the hell truly believes you can have success working 4 hours?
Right.
So it's not that. It's a fundamentals and a basics book about the things that I've learned and also the things I've observed. But then I took a lot of industry examples and personal examples, and I tell you about the things. So what's it about? It's about basics and fundamentals to create a life and business by choice. What's it not about? It's not about how to beat breast cancer. It's not about how to not work and be successful, because I think that's pure charlatanism. And then who am I to write it? We've already talked about that. I'm going on 50 years old. I haven't had a real job for 25 years. I think I've got the credentials based on all the background, the ups and the downs, and the failures, and the lessons from them, as well as the breadth of knowledge from speaking in corporate groups. 25.
Wow.
There you
Mic
go.
drop.
Mic drop. Exactly. That's one of those. That's my mic drop there. So with that, the interesting thing now, one of the things that you mentioned the 4-hour work week. And what I noticed, and the first thing that came to mind when you said that was the success of that book. Why? Because it said the 4-hour work week, the title. And your title did the same thing for me when it said do business better. That was like, okay, that's where I'm at right now. We're in a reinvention state here with our podcast and everything. So ours is how do we do business better? So you did work in the same playground as that book, though, like you said, I actually bought the book and tried to create the 4-hour work week, and it never happened. I think I went from 40 hours to 75 hours. But hey, that's neither here nor there. But so the fact that it's information that you can actually implement and go with is fantastic. But the one thing that you did do is you got a name that makes me stop and want to know more about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, by the way, Deborah, I really appreciate you saying that, because this title, I had the book halfway done, let's say, and it was starting to really gel, but without a title, it wasn't gelling the way it needed to. I was laying in a hotel room in New Brunswick, Canada in February a year ago.
Wow.
So it was about 23 below zero and the dead of winter. And I kept rolling this through my head. What is this book going to be called? What would Damien be very comfortable and have credibility telling folks what they could do?
Right.
And you know what I can do? I can help them do business better. And then this one came to me, and I'm like, yeah, because now they know what it's about. It's about business. It's active. It's about doing. It's not about talking about it. I get right at the beginning of the book. You and I, Stormie knows this because he's run his own business. He gets together and has drinks maybe on Friday night, and there's somebody that says, I've been thinking about, I've been talking about this. Like, hey, Roy, every time we get together, that's all you do is talk about, think about, talk about. I came from people like that.
Yeah.
We all have. Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. It's funny, and I'm going to go to so I have 2 boys. I've got a 26-year-old and a 21-year-old. They know, even from a kid, they would come to me and say, hey, Dad, I'm going to do this, or Dad, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, shut up. I don't want to hear about it. Tell me what you've done. I don't want to hear about what you're going to do. I want to hear about what you've done. Otherwise, it's just a fantasy. So, they would continue down the process, and I probably wasn't as rude as just saying shut up to my kids.
You probably were.
Who knows? Maybe I was. But my youngest, my 21-year-old, he's recently approached me and he's like, Dad, I get it. I now understand where you were coming from, because he's a physics major. He's a senior in school, and he's now running into individuals that are talking about what they're going to do, and now he sees how, I don't want to use the word disgust, but he's just he's not attracted to those types of individuals, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. We all are familiar with, and again, I came from some of those people. They're always going to do something. If a guy could do, my dad, I had to hear this my whole growing up. Well, if a guy could do this, like, well, why don't you just get him to do it? And all this standing around and yakking with the neighbors over complete utter bullshit. I just don't get it. So I agree. Now, I do talk about things like with my wife and say, hey, here's what I wonder if we should do this.
Right.
But those are contemplative business play, investment play, decisions about running our industry or business, whatever. So I'm sure that Borah has the same thing. She says, all right, I went about the 4-hour work week, and it didn't give me a 4-hour work week. Now it more than ever did. But she still is doing, and that's the important part. I lead off with, everybody says they're either going to do something or they're trying to do something. Those words both mean nothing.
Right.
Exactly. They mean absolutely nothing. I remember when I was in that transitional stage myself, and I had been a flight attendant for years, here, exit row. So I was tired of eating Top Ramen. We had the second furlough. They had lowered our pay for the second time. And I was like, okay, enough of this. Something has to change. And one of the ladies came back and she said that she was going to be a loan officer. And I was like, well, what's that? So she told me what it was and how the kind of money that they make. And I was like, I can do that. I'm going to do that. So I started going out and putting out applications to be a loan officer. Well, no one would hire me because they didn't care about the loan officer experience. They cared about sales experience.
Right.
So I got a little creative. And my father had a big company. He owned a novelty supply company. And he was all throughout the country in Las Vegas.
What kind of novelties?
Novelty supplies, not bobblehead Stormies, but novelty supplies.
Gotcha.
He did the fights, and that's when the fights were really big with Tyson and all the guys here in Vegas. So he had some big contracts that he did. So I kind of fudged a little. I don't recommend this, but a little. I kind of fudged a little and put that I was the Western Regional Sales Manager for my father's company. Well, I did help him with some of the sales and distribution and things like that. But what it did was it got me in the door for them to talk to me. Well, once they spoke with me, it was an easy fix. I've never had a job where I went into the final one-on-one and didn't get it. Never. And then that was the lead on into because it was the first time that it was like, okay, here's the job, but we're not going to pay you. It's all commission. And I was like, what do you mean you're not going to pay me? But that was my lead in, the stepping stone that I had to take to become a true entrepreneur. And since then, I haven't had a job since 25 years now?
Yeah, and I'm going to go back on something because she pulled that wool on me too. She says, Stormie, I'll be a great podcast co-host with you. And I'm like, well, tell me why this would be. And she made up some bullshit. And I've been living in that misery of her being my podcast host ever since.
Yeah, and you know what? I get the idea that it's worked out for you. Actually, I'm glad that she did that because she's the butter to your bread and all that kind of thing, right?
Third-party validation. You can't fight with that. Thank you, Damien. I love him already.
Anyway, but I've got to push back on something because, Damien, something in your book here, the brutal truth. I read something on there that I completely disagree with. Under your life chapter, you have a saying that says, if you accept it, you endorse it. So I've come to accept Deborah as my co-host, but I sure as hell don't endorse her.
I think, I told you it's a smart man. He knows the truth.
We talk about disruptions, and I think I have an understanding of the demographic that listens to your podcast, and that line right there is a really important one. What you accept, you endorse. And let's talk about why I wanted to quit and start my own thing. It was because I didn't like merit-based raises or promotions, weren't really based merit based on your one's ability to be the corporate sucker.
So true. So very true.
Like this. If you are a person that's sitting there on the fence, like we know so many folks, well, I'm thinking about starting my own business. I'm thinking about, well, I start, and everybody's doing that. And again, they make themselves uncomfortable. But you know what? Here's the one thing that might finally turn their crank and make them get off their ass and do something. Say, all right, didn't you say the reason you're thinking about starting this business is because you got passed over for promotion? Yeah. You know what? Since you've accepted that, you have just endorsed that. You have just the company treats you, and you endorse that behavior, and you endorse that level of leadership and management. So you know what? You didn't just accept it because it was, well, I can't put my family in harm. No. Let's admit it. You're too lazy, or you're too comfortable, and so you endorse it. You accept it. And that's
ouch! That is powerful.
That hurt. that hurt someone out there.
That's powerful. And it's such a true statement, but it is so brutally powerful.
Yeah, because everybody, Deborah and Stormie, they're going to say, what are you talking about? I accepted bad service at this restaurant because it just didn't want to make a scene. Okay. All right. It was a $37 dinner.
Buy that.
So you can live with that, but you also endorsed it because if you ever went back to that restaurant or for the next person that's going to come in, you accept that you endorse shitty service. But I think I say acceptance endorsement about your own life and your career. Yeah. If you accepted what your career did, how you didn't get the job or the raise or the promotion you got on merit, you basically just endorsed that level of promotion and that level of management.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Wow.
That is very, very true. We accept it. You accepted it. Now you endorse me.
Oh,
thank you. I appreciate that, Damien.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of different things like that a lot of folks think, okay, I pointed this out. A friend of mine's a school teacher. A couple of my friends are school teachers. Both of them look better. And I said, hey, first off, you're a friend of mine. But also, I said, there's stuff in here. You don't have to look your cool business to get something out of the trade section. They'll make you think about butter. But more importantly, we go through habits. These are habits you can use to create a good business. Also, you can use just to create a good life. I have one of my habits chapters is pull the trigger. Since we're talking about try, gonna, thinking about, talking about versus doing. Chapter number 1 says pull the damn trigger. Make the decision and go. Because that's what everybody, and they'll say, well, it's because I'm afraid. They want to admit they're afraid. Because of fear. I don't even think because of fear. I think it's because they truly would rather just sit back and let the decision be for them. It's the old decision by default than justifying the result versus being the active creator of the initial choice.
It's interesting that you should say that about pulling the trigger. So Stormie came to me recently about making a change to our podcast. Mm-hmm. And he was pretty excited about this, but Stormie has a tendency of going down these rabbit holes, Damien. Absolutely. He really does. He goes in and it's like a dog with a bone. Okay, so he says, I'm listening to this, and he sends me a podcast that I sent him months earlier that he didn't listen to. And so he says, I think we should change the name of our podcast. And I gave him a lot of resistance. And I think some of it was based around fear that we had already gotten the acceptance with where we were and it was working. But now his argument made a lot of sense, and share what it was and tell us, we want your professional opinion on this, Damien.
Yeah, we've got an expert here on the line. So
that's right.
It's interesting. When we originally decided we were going to do a podcast together, we went for the name Bizruptions. And we originally thought our podcast was going to be Borah and I just talking about our successes and failures when it has come to business. And, that's what we thought our podcast was originally going to be about. But then as the podcast evolved, we have had the unbelievable opportunity of getting experts like yourself on our show.
High-end individuals.
High-end, just incredible experts, subject matter experts on a variety of topics. And Borah and I were having a conversation, and during the course of that conversation, I'm like, wow, can you believe these powerhouse experts? In a few weeks, we're going to have Damian Mason on. He's a powerhouse expert. Then, we had Dr. Jeffrey McGee, Judy Moore. I mean, we've had just some incredible people that wasn't part of the original vision. So, and it's funny because we use that term powerhouse experts as we were referring to individuals like yourself. Mm-hmm. A light flashed on them like, Borah, what's a bizruption? Every time I speak to someone, people ask, well, tell me about your podcast. As a matter of fact, when we first met, Damien, I said, hey, I've got a podcast named Bizruptions. I believe you said, well, tell me, what is it about? And I had to do the explanation. And we were giving thoughts to that name, Powerhouse Experts. If I would have stated that the name of our podcast is Powerhouse Experts, I don't believe there would be any other explanation needed because the show, we're just bringing on powerhouse subject matter experts that can share their expertise that would be beneficial to our listeners in the world in large. So we've been thinking about, wrestling with, and I think we've made the decision that we're going to start doing a rebrand of Bizruptions to Powerhouse Experts in regards to do business better, reinvention.
What
do you think?
I like it because when you and I met on that fateful evening and you told me that, I thought, okay, it's a clever name, Bizruptions. It catches one's attention, but am I being disrupted? Is this more playing on the whole? It's been the buzzword for the last 3 years, right?
Right.
Disruption. And, that was right after Paradigm Shift and Pivot and, emotional intelligence. There's always some, but it does play into something that might 5 years from now not be as big. Disruption has been the big thing for the last couple of years.
Right.
The problem is it doesn't say what it is. I see podcasts again on something I do this better and well. You understand business and my other podcast is agriculture. We're not talking about weather, corn prices today. We're talking about business and agriculture. So I like the powerhouse experts. There's only one thing that maybe you might consider.
Okay.
Maybe.
Kick the bar off.
What if there are potential guests or listeners that don't know if they quite qualify as a powerhouse expert?
Then they wouldn't qualify for the show.
Okay.
Then,
So I like it because you are bringing experts. And then the next thing, I think there's not enough about them. You know, my friend Bruce Yokel has a branding book out all about them. His powerhouse experts are going to be a listener. Because what I'm wondering is, can we make sure that the people that are listening that get enough benefit to them? Powerhouse experts.
Interesting.
I love that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
If you want your listeners to tune in and realize that every day, so maybe it needs to be, powering your potential through powerhouse experts. What really do is you need to make sure that the listener says one to me.
Right.
Oh, you just gave me the tagline.
Absolutely. That's huge.
Wow. Thank you.
Well, I think you've got a chance to get some real good people on, and you already have that. And you have some really good people that can be your guests, and just make sure you never forget that they always wonder what's in it for me, because consumers, people, humans care about themselves.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And that's what we always wanted to be. And that was kind of the mindset behind the banter that Stormie and I have. Most people think that this is for the camera. Actually, the show came about because we've had this banter for years here in the office. And one of the gentlemen in the office recommended that Stormie bring me, because the podcast was his baby, that he bring me onto the podcast because he's a bore without me. So, so they recommended that. And that's how it came about was, okay, let's do a podcast with business people so that we can give them great information, but let's give them a break from their mundane day. Let's give them something fun that they can, still learn from, but they can have some fun with as well. And life throws us torpedoes. We're constantly in a state of trying to figure out. We're constantly in a state of ducking their torpedoes or damn the torpedoes, if you will. Mm-hmm. So what we decided to do was to bring on those torpedoes, things that happen in life, the insults that you get, the people that don't believe, all of those things, but still keep pushing through it. The caca, the stanky poo that comes with life in business on a regular basis.
And she's stanky.
Well, Deborah, first off, I want to say that I agree with you. Stormie is an absolute bore. You're dead on. You're dead on right. He's got. I mean, if you look up boring engineer in the dictionary, there's a picture of him, right?
It's going to be a snippet for our show advertising.
So, hey, when you talk about the thing about your listeners, I've continued to try and make sure, we have a good discussion and dialogue, and spend a lot of fun being on here, but I want to make sure that we are delivering enough value to these folks, because
we certainly did.
I think the best thing we can do is make sure that we respect their time,
yes,
and deliver them something of value. And I want to know, have we done that? Because I want to make sure that right now, what did you have written down that you want to make sure that we can cover, that's something that a hard lesson or some setback that all three of us can relate to, that maybe we can the skin needs for your listeners?
So I definitely wrote down the who's it for, who's it not for, what's it about, what's it not about. Who am I to write it? Who am I to deliver it, whether it's a speech or whatever it is? And then make sure it's all about them, and then powering your potential. I love that piece. But the one thing that I do want to get to before we get to the end here is, you mentioned your book and your podcast. When are those launching?
Well, the podcast is already launched. I've listened to
the podcast is launched. Okay.
And so tell us, what can people expect listening to your podcast? Because I think Do Business Better, that why listen to you? I think you've done a very, very good job of why someone should listen to you. They're either going to resonate or they're not. And if they are, well, I think some of those people want to learn more from Damian Mason. So tell us what happens on your podcast for those that want to check it out.
Yeah, the Do Business Better podcast is geared really more to solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, business owners, and people that want to be business owners and self-employed types, because that's who I bring on as guests, is specifically to advise them. And I take a little different approach than you guys do with your powering your potential with powerful experts podcast. I go shorter. I keep mine around 20 to 22 minutes typically, and I do more of them. And that is the idea that I had was, let's make it listen to work. But we always say, all right, like for instance, one of my guests was a friend of mine who sold his business at 50 and he retired. He doesn't really want to stay retired, it just happens to be right now. Well, what can you learn from a guy that sold his business and his company and retired at 50? Another great guest I had was a woman that owns a fitness facility with her husband in Indianapolis, Indiana. And you say, well, what learn from her? They have had 30 years of business, and you're talking about an industry that every year there's cross training, cross fitness, kettlebells, Gold's Gym, LA Fitness, 24-hour fitness. You know, they are inundated with this. They are an independent facility that has 14 employees, a big place for 30 years. So you can learn something. How you use relevant in every day, a new big national chain is open up down the street. Those are the kinds of things where you talk to real people that are in their own business. Another thing I think I'd like to share with you, you said something really neat there, Deborah, a little bit ago. You talked about remembering the insults. Did I hear you say that right? You talked about
Yes.
when, is that your job or your customers or when life really handed you lemons, that kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So in the book, I have, in my book, It's Better, I have as one of my chapters about resilience. And the thing I say about resilience, I have on my podcast a number of people, like say big guys. You run your own business. Say I got Stormie, who's got his company there, Yokel Local Marketing, and I say, hey, tell me what I can learn about this. And then I always ask these people a question. I say, all right, you've run your own business for 17 years. I think the most important traits to success are risk tolerance, drive and ambition, resilience, and vision. Which of those four do you gravitate toward? And about half of them, maybe a third of them, will say resilience, because the world kicks your ass. Doesn't mean to, it's just, you know, my job, I'm sure Borah can say, I got 2 pay decreases in a row, and then I got to do something. How do I start this thing? So the resilience factor, I say it's probably the most important trait to me. It is beyond drive. You got to have ambition. Nobody's going to work for you, and then after that, it's resilient because you get pushed around a little bit, and it's how quickly you get back up on that. And then everybody says, "Well, it's either what you're born with or you're not." Damien, you're the youngest of 9 kids, and you learned how to be a fighter because of that, and that's why you've got such resilience. And you started your own business when you were 25, and you were penniless, still paying off all your debt. Yeah. But you can strengthen your resolve. And I think what you talked about earlier, Deborah, you can remember when life kicked you around. You can remember those setbacks. And then you can also say, I'm not going to let it push me. I'm going to let it be enough of a learning factor. I will never forget what I learned. And I know I got through it. So when you know what you've been through, you know what you can get through.
Right.
That's true. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well stated. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So where do we get the book? Or is the book out yet?
The book came out April 2nd. It's on barnesandnoble.com. It's on amazon.com. It's on my website, damianmason.com,
Okay.
which is DAMIAN. Yeah, Do Business Better. The podcast is free. The book you'll have to pay for. It's also available on Audible. It's also available on Kindle. So if you want to read it on your phone or laptop or iPad, you can do that. If you want to read it in the traditional sense as an actual book, you can do that. If you want to listen to it. The sad part, I wanted to be the voice of Do Business Better, and they hired a voice talent. I wasn't able to affect that. So in my next contract, on my next book, I'm going to insist that I'm the voice of it, because I figure if you buy this book, you want to hear it from my perspective, from a voice talent.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's very true. Yes.
Well, Damien, I think you brought it. You absolutely brought it. This was a great show. Can you believe that this has been an hour? Doesn't feel like it, does it?
Hey, I could sit here and talk to you two all day. And also, I'm glad you didn't fight too much. It started off a little bit tenuous. I thought, all right, these two are going to not get along. And I got to tell you, if I had to lay money down, I think the Borah probably 2-1 kicks the
I told you this is a smart man.
I tell you.
Well, since you guys are in Vegas, and if this was the MGM Grand, and it was the odds makers were looking for me to call it, I'd call it 2-1.
I'm saying, at some point in time, someone may make us the pre-fight, show. I'm like, I'm ready to go, get in the ring.
Yeah,
the only thing I must say, though, I think it goes the distance. It's going to be a decision because Stormie's kind of crafty. He's one of the watch what he's doing. So it's probably going to be the full 15 rounds.
There you go.
I'm definitely going to cheat. I'm going to throw sand in her eyes.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I am so pleased to have had the chance to meet you and to get your vast wealth of knowledge here on the show today. Thank you so much, Damien.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
And for those of you that are regular, listeners to this show, be sure that you subscribe. This was a great show. Share it with someone that you know that may benefit from the information that Damien Mason shared with us. And if you want to know more about Damien Mason, guess what? He has a podcast too, the Do Business Better podcast. You can find that wherever you get your podcast. And be sure to rate, review. And remember, when you rate and review us, give me the 5 stars, the thumbs up. To hell with the Borah. But that all works out okay. Absolutely. And we will see you on the next episode of Bizruptions.
Soon to be.
Soon to be Powerhouse Experts. And what's the tagline?
The tagline is, and he just gave it to us, powering your potential.
Absolutely.
With Powerhouse Experts.
We'll see you guys soon.
Thanks so much, Damien. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Let me just say,